Al-Awlaki with VOA's Middle East Monitor. Coming up, Turkey's rescue teams press to find quake survivors. The Islamist party claims victory in Tunisian elections. Advice for Arab Spring activists from an Egyptian revolutionary.
Keep struggling, nothing impossible, that's all. It's not easy, we just realized that.
And the U.S. and Syria have a tit-for-tat with their ambassadors. It's all ahead on The Voice of America. Time is running out for people believed to be still trapped in collapsed buildings after Sunday's deadly earthquake in southeastern Turkey. The number of dead is more than 430, but that is expected to rise after a second night of freezing temperatures. Dorian Jones reports from Istanbul.
More and more rescue teams are reaching the quake-stricken area in southeastern Turkey as efforts are intensifying to find survivors buried in the rubble of thousands of collapsed buildings. With a second night of freezing conditions, it's a race against time. In the early hours of Tuesday morning, 5 people were dug out of their collapsed apartment building. Later, a 2-week-old baby, her mother and grandmother were also rescued from the rubble of their home. But hundreds still remain unaccounted for. Many of the region's remote villages have still not been reached, with access to numerous roads cut off. Those that have been reached have been devastated, with their traditional houses made of mud and clay offering little protection to the powerful 7.2 quake. The magnitude of the disaster is leading to increased scrutiny over the government's refusal to accept almost all the offers of international help, including from Israel, where there are current tense bilateral relations. But Deputy Prime Minister Bülent Arınç claimed Turkey's refusal of help is not politically motivated.
Bunu söyleyenler çok çirkin bir iş yapıyorlar. Bizim İsrail'le hükümetler arası ilişkilerimiz.
He says such a claim is horrendous. He says that while Turkey may not be on the best of terms with Israel, to respond negatively to such a humane offer from the Israeli government in the wake of such a disaster because of separate agendas would have been wrong and inappropriate. The Deputy Prime Minister says it's completely untrue that Turkey refused Israel's help for that reason. Nearly 90 countries have offered assistance, but Turkey's only accepted help from Iran and Azerbaijan, which border the area affected by the quake. The government claims it can deal with the crisis, but with the approach of winter and snow predicted later this week, pressure is building to accept assistance. The region is one of the most poorest in Turkey, with many people having lost what little they had. Although tent cities and field hospitals have been set up, criticism has been growing that more needs to be done. Dorian Jones for VOA News, Istanbul, Turkey.
Tunisia turns to creating a new constitution and interim government as election results today confirm a first-place finish by the moderate Islamist party Ennahda. From the capital, Tunis, Lisa Bryant reports many Tunisians appeared satisfied with their country's groundbreaking elections, even if they don't necessarily agree with the results.
2 days after casting their ballots in a peaceful, ebullient vote, Tunisians are back to work Tuesday, or at least some of them. Outdoor cafes are packed with women and men. Streets are snarled with honking traffic. University student Hamdi bin Jabrella, sporting jeans and sunglasses, is pleased but not surprised at the election results.
Je suis content parce que c'est la première fois que la religion islamique.
Bin Jabrella voted for the Islamist Ennahda party, which captured the most votes. He says he's glad Islam is now part of Tunisia's politics. He sees Turkey as a good model for his country. One middle-aged woman who only gave her first name, Emla, voted for a leftist party, but she's still satisfied with the outcome.
L'essentiel, c'est que je pense que l'essentiel, c'est que
Emla says what's essential is that the elections were democratic and transparent and that voter turnout was high. She says democracy is about accepting the results. International observers have hailed Tunisia's elections for a new constituent assembly. Just as Tunisia inspired the Arab Spring uprisings, some believe its first democratic vote might be another model. But Fedia Trebelsi, wearing a maroon hijab and black gloves, is among those who did not go to the polls. Trebelsi says even if she's veiled, she's against El Nahda. She believes in a separation of religion and politics. The new assembly is tasked to write Tunisia's next constitution. Eric Goldstein, a deputy director for Human Rights Watch, says that alone will be a major challenge.
Writing a constitution is a huge job because it's going to be the roadmap for the laws that are going to be revised and the way that people relate to their government, how much of a presidential system, how much parliamentary.
The assembly must also appoint an interim government to run daily affairs, and it must deal with the many problems that fueled Tunisia's January revolution, including the faltering economy and high unemployment. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Tunis.
Libyans went about their normal business Monday, the first day after the official end of their revolution, which overthrew Muammar Gaddafi after 42 years of one-man rule. But the new era was not far from people's minds, as VOA's Al Pessin found during a visit to Tripoli University.
Students returned to the campus of Tripoli University preparing to register for classes. But at the engineering department, they ran into a party. The boys were exuberant, singing and chanting, and even dancing to patriotic songs. The girls watched, clapped, took pictures, and sang along. It was a day they had waited a long time to celebrate, after spending the summer dodging bullets or raising money for classmates who had gone to the front to fight the pro-Gaddafi forces. As they celebrated, some took a moment to talk about their feelings.
Can you believe yourself that we didn't invite these people? As soon as we turned the music, everybody came with all their happiness, with all their hope to make this place and this country better.
Today we are happy, more than happy, we are delighted. It's the end of the dictatorship and of the end of the tyrant. We are free. Today our dreams come true. Thanks God.
I came here to prove to and to give thanks to all that martyrs that gave them their bloods.
We are very glad Libya is finally liberated and we are free now. I hope that everything is going to be better since now and forever. We hope so.
It will be back to classes for these students on Saturday, the start of a school year delayed by the revolution. Some talk about getting in the hard work of building a new democracy. But for an hour or so, like students everywhere, they just enjoyed the party. And these Libyan students had a particularly good reason to celebrate. Al Pessin, VOA News, Tripoli.
Hours after the U.S. State Department announced that U.S. Ambassador to Syria Robert Ford had returned to Washington as a result of security threats, the Syrian embassy in Washington said its ambassador, Imad Mustafa, was returning to Damascus. VOA's Suzanne Presto in Washington reports on diplomatic tensions.
Both the U.S. ambassador to Syria and the Syrian ambassador to the U.S. have been recalled to their capitals, and officials on both sides say the respective recalls are for consultations. But State Department officials also say Ford was brought back to Washington as a result of credible threats to his safety. Speaking to reporters in Washington Monday, State Department spokeswoman Victoria Nuland underscored that Ford's return to Washington is not a withdrawal. She also accused the Syrian government of engaging in a smear campaign against the U.S. diplomat.
We are concerned about a campaign of regime-led incitement targeted personally at Ambassador Ford by the state-run media of the government of Syria, and we're concerned about the security situation that has created.
Nuland said Ford is expected to return to Damascus after his consultations are completed, although the timing is uncertain. She said the Syrian government must provide for Ford's security when he returns. Ford, a career diplomat, was appointed U.S. ambassador to Syria in January. He has served in Algeria, Bahrain, and Iraq within the past decade. Salman Sheikh, who specializes in conflict resolution issues in the Middle East, is the director of the Brookings Doha Center. He told VOA that Syrian media have tried to portray Ambassador Ford's work in Iraq in an unfavorable light.
I think it's an effort to try and paint him into some sort of a sectarian picture as well, to capitalize on perhaps some of the sectarian issues that have come to the fore in Iraq, and to try and not so subtly link them with the sectarian issues in Syria itself.
Ford has been an outspoken critic of the Syrian government's violent crackdown on political dissent. The United Nations says 3,000 people have been killed since the uprising against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government began in March. Ford's stance has agitated the Syrian government and its supporters. Last month, an angry mob confronted him as he prepared to meet a leading opposition figure in Damascus. And the Syrian government issued an order restricting the movements of foreign ambassadors after Ford and the French ambassador visited the city of Hama to show solidarity with residents there. Sheikh says Ford has played a very important role in bearing witness to the situation inside Syria, and his departure will be a blow to members of the Syrian opposition. Still, he points out that the United States and other members of the international community have relations with Syrian opposition figures inside Syria and abroad.
It's important Ambassador Ford leaving, but I think it's not necessarily the end of the world in terms of the efforts to work with the opposition. It does, though, signal that there will be one less line of communication, direct line of communication between the Syrian regime and the United States, and that will likely, I think, lead to a further ratcheting up of tensions between them.
States Newland again said engagement with Mr. Assad is over. And while the U.S. and Syria maintain diplomatic relations, U.S. officials, including President Barack Obama, have called on President Assad to step aside. Sheikh says the recalls may have been inevitable.
We have been on a diplomatic collision course between the United States and the Assad regime in Syria. It's been surprising that it has taken this long for Ambassador Ford to finally depart from Syria, given the pressures that were mounting on him. And then, of course, for the reciprocal action that the Syrians have also taken with Imad Mustafa also leaving Washington.
Despite the ambassador's absences, the U.S. Embassy in Syria and the Syrian Embassy in the United States are staffed and operating. Suzanne Presto, VOA News, Washington.
Monday on Middle East Monitor, we met Bassem Fathi, who was in the thick of things during the revolt in Egypt. Now the nonprofit organization Human Rights First is issuing the activist its annual Human Rights Award for his work to bring political freedom to Egypt and create a democracy. We asked him about the role of social media in the Arab Spring of Egypt.
Social media and internet in general, this was a very important tool. Of course, where as insiders might refuse the model of exaggeration, the role of new media, and saying it was an internet revolution or a Facebook revolution, and feeling this is a kind of media issue by the Western media. But at the end of the day, it was very important for years in recruiting people and spreading the ideas, where it was the only open space for the activists for spreading their ideas. However, the people just decided to join. They were offline people. They never heard about Facebook or Twitter. The second thing, the crucial day of the uprising on 28th of January, the internet was totally off, and actually all the kinds of communications, the mobile phones and the internet, and many even of the satellite TVs, it was down. So I mean, this day was totally offline, and this was the crucial day in our uprising.
Well, what can revolutionaries of other nations learn from your personal experience?
The most important lesson that we can challenge the impossible. That's what happened exactly. At some point, all the analysts in Egypt and outside of Egypt, and even the activists themselves, they totally were disappointed and never thought that the people will engage and join and come to the street to join us in our opposition. But it happened already. So, I mean, what we can learn is that the people all the time can do it.
What is your best advice for those trying to build democracy?
keep struggling. Nothing impossible. That's all. It's not easy. We just realized that starting a revolution is much easier than building democracy. A lot of challenges now where it's not easy at all. But I mean, we have nothing else to do. We never imagined that we're gonna have a day like 25th of January or 28th of January, and we'll go out and to win. So whatever will be the disappointments now, we have nothing else to do unless keep struggling.
And what about the future of Egypt? What would you like to see? A democracy like we have here in the United States, or something special?
If we're dreaming about democracy, then of course we're going to dream a better model than the United States.
Bassem Fathi, winner of the First Human Rights Award.
Are you looking for a comprehensive daily look at events reshaping the Middle East? Visit voanews.com/ME. You'll find VOA's original reporting from the region, in-depth analysis from our Washington team, VIP interviews, online polls, photo essays, and mini documentaries. Bookmark us or add us to your RSS reader. That's voanews.com/ME.
A man accused of plotting to kill Saudi Arabia's ambassador in Washington pleaded not guilty Monday during a brief hearing before a federal judge in New York. Larry Freund has details.
Mansour al-Barbisar stood before Judge John Keenan. In answer to a clerk's question, "How do you plead?" he replied, "Not guilty." Those were his only words in court during the 5-minute arraignment. The 56-year-old al-Barbisar is accused by the government of plotting to murder the Saudi Arabian ambassador to the United States by setting off explosives in a Washington restaurant. Al-Barbisar holds both Iranian and U.S. passports. Also accused in the assassination plot is Ghulam Shakuri, a member of a special operations unit of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Shakuri is still at large. An Iranian spokesman has said the charges against the two men are baseless. Al-Barbisar's lawyer, Sabrina Shroff, discussed several issues with the judge, including the discovery process in which the defendant can review the evidence that prosecutors will present during the actual trial. Judge Keenan suggested that may take some time because he said conversations recorded by the government will have to be translated from Farsi to English. The judge also suggested there may be challenges to al-Barbisar's alleged confessions to U.S. law enforcement agents after he was arrested last month at New York's JFK International Airport. According to the government, he was advised of his rights not to incriminate himself and to have a lawyer present. Al-Barbisar allegedly waived those rights and admitted to agents that he had been recruited, funded, and directed by men whom he took to be senior officials in the Iranian Special Operations Unit. Under U.S. law, criminal suspects held by police must be told that they have a right to remain silent. The right was spelled out by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1966 in a landmark case that bears the name of the defendant, Miranda. Vanessa Antone of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers says if a suspect is not properly informed of his rights, the court may suppress the confession.
Defense counsel would want to inquire into the circumstances of how those rights were given, what exact warning was given, possibly the state of mind or other circumstances going on with the suspect at that point. And upon looking into all those inquiries, there might be a basis to challenge the waiver of Miranda rights. So defense counsel would have to look into all those issues and possibly see if there's a basis to claim that the Miranda rights weren't voluntarily waived or that there was no waiver at all.
Any defense challenges, Ms. Antone explains, would be the subject of a ruling before the trial by the presiding judge. Judge Keenan set the next pretrial hearing in this case for December 21st. The judge said he hoped for a relatively early date for the trial, which is expected to last 3 to 4 weeks. For VOA News, this is Larry Freund in New York.
Danya Bijan is an Iranian-American chef. She lived in Tehran until her family fled during the 1979 Iranian Revolution. In the U.S., Bijan's mother experimented with American cooking, but always incorporated familiar Persian flavors, recreating a sense of home for her family. She passed her recipes to her daughter, and in this report written by Faiza El-Masri and read by Faith Lapidus, we hear more about Chef Bijan's journey, including her recipes and the stories behind them.
Donia Bijan spent her first 16 years in Iran.
My parents had a hospital in Tehran. I grew up on the top floor of the hospital. You know, it had beautiful gardens. We even had planted a vegetable garden. And I watched my parents run this hospital like you would run a large family.
Bijan's mother ran the kitchen, and that's where Donia had her first cooking lessons.
My mother planned the menus for the patients, and I was always welcome in the kitchen.
Suddenly, the family had to leave Iran. They settled in San Francisco.
And again, I watched her in the kitchen in America transform and try to learn and tune in to the flavors of her new country through their food and by cooking.
Food helped Bijan's mother connect with neighbors, but her Persian recipes on the family dinner table helped heal their homesick hearts as well. Food became an expression of belonging, and later a career. With her mother's encouragement, Bijan was able to realize her dreams. After studying at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, she returned to San Francisco and started her own French restaurant. But a few years ago, she began to rediscover Persian cuisine.
When my mother died in 2004, I found these recipes, and I very much felt that she had left those for me to find and that they carried her story. But it took me over a year to really understand what to do with it.
Bijan decided to compile the recipes in a cookbook. She calls it a food memoir.
I realized that recipes are so dull if they are just instructions, and you can convey so much with a recipe if it's tied in with a story.
Bijan's book, Maman's Homesick Pie, A Persian Heart in an American Kitchen, contains 30 recipes. They include saffron yogurt rice with chicken and eggplant, braised chicken with Persian plums, and orange cardamom cookies. All are delivered with stories.
When I was talking about spending our summers by the Caspian Sea, it was natural for me to include the fava bean omelet because I remember eating it by the seaside with all my relatives.
The book includes some of her own recipes.
When I talk about the ratatouille that I made in Paris, it also was a natural transition from describing how nervous I was that my father was going to come and visit me in Paris and that I wanted to show off, really, what I had learned, and I bungled the whole thing.
Bijan says she's a regular customer of the date farmer who comes every week to the farmer's market in San Francisco. She uses his dates to make cinnamon date bars.
I remember that there was a similar cookie that my mother would buy for me. She was a member of parliament, and her district was in the center of Iran, where they specialized in these date cookies. And she would go away to visit her district, and, I would miss her so much. And she would come back and slowly take this box out of her purse and hand it to me. And everything was forgiven in that moment. Her absence was forgiven.
Bijan says she hopes readers will try some of the recipes. She says Persian dishes are not as difficult to make as they might seem. All it takes is patience and practice. For writer Faiza El-Masri, I'm Faith Lapidus, VOA News, Washington.
This has been VOA's Middle East Monitor. Join us Monday through Friday for news from the region and of interest to the region. Coming up on International Edition, explosions are heard after Yemeni troops and rivals declare a ceasefire. Thanks for tuning in to the Voice of America.
For more on the stories you've heard on our radio programs, visit our website at voanews.com. That's where you'll find in-depth reports, related stories, videos, and more from our team of correspondents. Or take the news with you by downloading podcasts of your favorite VOA program. That's at voanews.com. Online news for a changing world.